A while back you saw something small. Two cars, barely moving, tap bumpers. A nothing event. You'd forget it by lunch. Except someone's about to ask you about it. A week later, a friend asks how fast they were going when they smashed into each other. Smashed. You don't notice the word, but your memory just did. And just like that, the gentle little tap becomes a wreck. Crumpled metal, glass on the road. You can picture it. There was no glass. There was barely a dent. One word, dropped in after the fact, didn't change what happened. It changed what you remember happening. How is that even possible? Go figure. This has a name, the misinformation effect. And before you decide you're uniquely gullible, you're not. It works on almost everyone, confident people especially. Here's the assumption underneath all of it. We think memory is a recording, a tape in a drawer. You press play, you get the footage, exactly as filmed. That picture of memory is comforting. It's also wrong. You don't replay a memory, you rebuild it, every single time, from scattered fragments. And rebuilding leaves gaps, which means there's room. Room for things that weren't there to get quietly mortared in. And the brain hates a gap, so it fills them with what's plausible, what fits, and crucially, with anything you've been told since. The patch looks identical to the original. Psychologists prove this with almost insultingly simple setups. People watched films of car crashes, then got asked how fast the cars were going. Same films for everyone. They just swapped one verb in the question. Smashed got people guessing about 40 miles an hour. Contacted, same crash, got about 32. The footage never moved. The word moved the speedometer in their heads by roughly 9 miles an hour. So picture the thing doing the rebuilding as a little guy in your head. Meet the retoucher, part archivist, part overeager photo editor, working in the vault where you keep your memories. Here's his job. Every time you recall something, he doesn't show you the wall. He takes the photo down to hand it to you. Which means, for a moment, that memory is off the wall and in his hands. Editable. And while it's in his hands, he listens to you. Hear the word smashed? He decides the picture should match. A little crumple here, some glass there. He's not lying to you. He's helping. He thinks he's being accurate. Then he files it back. And this is the whole trick. He never marks it edited. There's no original to compare it to. Next time you look, the touch-up is the memory. As far as you can tell, it was always there. Which means every act of remembering is also a chance to edit. The more you revisit a memory, the more passes the retoucher gets. Your most told stories are your most retouched ones. Now the part that turns a neat finding into something unsettling. A week after the films, those same people got one more question, slipped in casually. Did you see any broken glass? There was no broken glass, none, in any of the films. The people who'd heard smashed a week earlier, nearly a third now remembered glass. The hit group, half as many. The word hadn't just nudged a number in the moment. It had spent a week quietly growing glass into the memory. That's the retoucher with a full week to work. He took one suggestive word and built a detail out of it. A whole sensory thing that the person would now swear they saw. And they're sincere. They're not lying. They remember the glass. It gets pettier than verbs. Ask, did you see the broken taillight? And more people remember one than if you ask about a broken taillight. The smuggles in an assumption that it existed, and the retoucher takes the hint. A single, tiny word. So the obvious story, people lie or memory just gets fuzzy, is too small. This isn't fog. It's forgery. Specific, vivid, false details get installed, and the owner has no idea anything was added. Which raises a darker question. If one verb can plant a shard of glass, could you plant something bigger? An entire event? A childhood that never happened? Researchers tried exactly this. They gave people a few true childhood stories from a relative and slipped in one fake one. You got lost in a shopping mall, you were scared, a stranger helped you. All confirmed by family, none of it real. About a quarter of people came to remember it, some in rich detail, adding touches no one had suggested. A careful redo of the study years later, with more people, found it in about a third. The retoucher doesn't just retouch photos, he can forge a whole one. And they didn't feel tricked. They built the memory, then moved in. It became part of who they were. That's the leap, from editing a detail to authoring a past. Okay, surely you can feel the difference? A real memory feels solid, a fake one feels flimsy? Here's the gut punch. Not reliably. False memories can feel just as vivid as true ones, sometimes more. So the link you assume, the more sure I am, the more right I must be, is weaker than you'd ever guess. Confidence and accuracy can drift completely apart. You can be dead certain and dead wrong, and it feels identical from the inside. Worse, confidence can be inflated after the fact. Tell a witness, "Good, you got him," and their certainty swells, even though the actual memory never improved. A pat on the back rewrites how sure you are, not what you saw. Which means the most confident witness in the room is not automatically the most accurate one. Certainty is a feeling, it is not a receipt. If this were just about whether you remember glass, it'd be a fun party fact. It isn't. We treat memory as evidence, and juries trust a confident eyewitness more than almost anything else. The Innocence Project tracks people freed by DNA after being convicted of crimes they didn't commit. Of those overturned cases, mistaken eyewitness identification was involved in roughly 7 out of 10. It is the single leading cause. Not lying witnesses, mistaken ones. And often nobody lied. A sincere witness, a suggestive lineup, a leading question from someone in a uniform, and the retoucher does the rest. Sometimes painting a real, innocent face into the role of the criminal. This is why the fixes are all about the retoucher. Lineups run by someone who doesn't know the suspect. Neutral, non-leading wording, and recording how sure the witness is at the very first identification, before any feedback can pump it up. For most of this story, the suggester was a careless human, a cop in a hurry, a lawyer with an angle. But the suggester doesn't have to be human anymore. In a 2024 study, people watched a simulated crime, then got interviewed, some by a chatbot that slipped misleading assumptions into its questions. It produced far more false memories than a plain interview. And a week later, those false memories hadn't faded. A friendly, patient, infinitely scalable suggester. The retoucher just got an intern. One that's polite, available at 3 a.m., and very, very confident. Worth keeping an eye on. Now, an honest word, because this is the part people overshoot. This does not mean memory is fiction, or that you're a leaf in the wind. Most of your memories are roughly right. Some people resist suggestion strongly. A heads up that misinformation is coming sometimes blocks it. And scientists still argue about the mechanism. Does the new detail overwrite the original? Or does the real memory survive underneath, just harder to reach past the louder fake? Genuinely unsettled. That's allowed. But the headline is rock solid, and it survived being retested. Memory is rebuilt, not replayed. And language can edit it after the fact, without your permission and without your knowledge. So what do you actually do with this? First, downgrade your trust in the feeling. Vivid and certain means this feels true. It does not by itself mean this is true. Hold your most confident memories the most loosely. Second, for anything that matters, lock it down fast and raw. Write it, record it, before you've told the story 5 times, and before anyone asks you a leading question. The first untouched telling becomes your master copy. Third, catch the leading question, including the ones you ask yourself. He snapped at me versus he answered me. Describe the same moment, and build 2 different memories of it. The verb you reach for is a brush. You're retouching too. And when it really counts, trust the note you wrote in the moment over the confident memory you have now, even when the memory is your own. Especially then. So your memory isn't a vault of untouched photographs. It's a working studio, and the retoucher is always on shift, usually keeping the place tidy, occasionally taking direction from the wrong person. And the eeriest part is the part you'll never feel. A retouched memory feels exactly like an original. There's no little crimson warning light. There never was. Take this one. You're sure you already subscribed to this channel. Are you though? Or did somebody just retouch that? Maybe check. For science.